Good afternoon, and I'd like to thank everybody for their time and interest in the California Cloud Forum. I'm Victor Kraus. I'm the Deputy Director over Infrastructure Services, and I'm pleased to have you attend this afternoon. Next slide. We have a couple of housekeeping items. One is this will be recorded and made available for future viewing, and it will be sent out to all the participants on this meeting. The second housekeeping is only the participants of this forum will be able to speak. And if you have any questions, there's a question and answer button at the bottom of the page. We have monitors that will be monitoring throughout the session, and we'll have a question and answer session at the end where we'll be able to review those questions and possibly answer future questions. And then after the forum, please complete the survey. I'd love to hear your feedback and so we can incorporate some of those and see where we're going in the future. Slide number 3, please. Today's agenda, we'll do a walkthrough of what the program is, what are the coming features, what are the policy updates that this encompasses, the California Cloud Services Assessment, what it is that we're asking of you when you come into and want to use a private cloud service. And then thirdly, what does that look like with your workforce, your security, and how does that process workflow to do the cloud assessment? We'll have ample times again at the end of this for any question and answer and any further on discussions with that. So with that, I thank you for your time, and I'll turn it over to Jonathan Pratt.
Thanks. And we had a quick question in the chat that I think probably a lot of people want to know, and I'm definitely not stalling as more people jump onto the call, but can we explain what's going to be available to folks after the meeting? How will they be able to see the recording? Will they be able to access the deck? All that good stuff.
Yes, so those will be sent out again to the participants that attended this meeting. We can include that as part of the recording. Or at least send a link out to the recording. I believe we have the links at the end of the page as well, or at the end of the presentation.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, so we'll send out the recording so you can see the full recording with our answers and everything that's not on paper. You'll also see some resources that we'll be using this as a source for. And then before I get started, we have a bunch of very esteemed panelists from CDT, and they'll introduce themselves as they participate in those various topics that Victor lined up. So I see people are still jumping on, but to make the most of our time, I want to say, hi, I'm Jonathan Pratt. I'm the State Chief Technology Officer with CDT. I'm really excited that I get to kind of kick off this discussion because in meeting with, and I see a lot of you that I know on the call, in meeting with a lot of you, and meeting with a lot of CIOs across the state, procurement officers, I think the main question we get asked, honestly, is why are we doing this? Why are we making such a big change? And why are we really evaluating what cloud means at the state? And I think the big kind of focus for us is to really modernize the way that we're looking at our technology and making it more aligned with what we all need as a state and what you all need as our clients and partners. So about 10 years ago, the CDT issued its cloud strategy, and we mean that kind of broadly because we know it's a lot of individual policies and procedures and governance. But the interesting thing at that point is there really was just cloud and not cloud. You could either have something in the cloud or you could have something in an on-premise data center. There were some other options there, but those were the primary two. And there were so many advantages to cloud that a lot of our policies, a lot of what was going on in the industry was what was called cloud first, meaning you should always be thinking about moving everything to the cloud. When you're designing infrastructure solutions, you should think cloud first. But as time went on and as there were more choices for what cloud meant, there were more sophisticated offerings for multi-cloud, hybrid clouds, different types of clouds. That decision to just emphasize cloud first ended up making things kind of complicated because what we ended up seeing was that all of the additional options create a significant amount of complexity. And in our role as trying to be a partner to you all, we weren't fulfilling that role as much as we could to make sure that when you made a decision to integrate cloud into your infrastructure or migrate an application or service to the cloud, that you were doing so thinking about all of the factors that might affect the success of that migration. So with the policy that we had in place, we were really in a state of what we're calling cloud chaos, meaning that there were so many different options out there. There were so many different choices being made independently by each of you that it ended up creating kind of a disjointed cloud infrastructure at the state. So what we're doing is we're adopting a methodology that's more in line with what at the federal level is called Cloud Smart. So rather than us just looking at cloud first or just looking at cloud versus not cloud, we want to make sure that you have a variety of offerings that are going to allow you to get consistent offerings that are consistent with our architecture, that meet best practices in security, that are going to be cost effective, but yet customized to meet your needs. And what we want to do is make sure that there is some sort of evidence-backed design, and we're really working together to prepare for integrations of cloud into your infrastructure, into the state's infrastructure. So we're really trying to think about how do we make sure we have the right cloud for the right situation? How do we make sure that everyone has that high level of security and control and that there's consistency? And how do we ensure that everybody is making the most cost-efficient use of the technology as possible? Because one thing that we have seen, and hopefully some of you on the call have not been through this, is a short term or in a vacuum, a decision to migrate a system to the cloud looks really good. And then later on, we realize that we might have trouble reaching the workforce that we need, or implementing security to the standards that we'd like, or the costs all of a sudden start ballooning up. And we want to make sure that we're working with you to set you up for success when you're thinking about your technology. Our next speaker, Jared Johnson, who's our deputy director, is going to talk in a second about how we did that through some policy changes and through a new process. But Sydney, can you move to the next slide? So before we get to that, I just want to break down really quickly what at the federal level are called the 4 pillars of Cloud Smart. These are really the things that we're hoping to work with you on as we've made these changes to our policies and to our approach around cloud. The first one is security, which I think is kind of self-explanatory, but as we discussed, we want to make sure that we are incorporating and architecting best practices of security into our design. This also includes disaster recovery. So we never want you to be in a situation where you've made a decision to go with a particular cloud provider. There's, unfortunately an incident, and it takes us way too long to get your data, your infrastructure back up and running, or it takes us way too long to be able to figure out where a problem is. We want to make sure that we have everything secure, both for our residents, but also for ourselves, so we have that business continuity. In terms of architecture, we're going to be looking at, is the solution that you're picking scalable? Does it align with the other architecture that we have within the state? So does it fit with the way that we're managing technology? And we also want to be thinking about what other solutions are out there. There may be a solution that the state already has for something that you're looking to do that you may not be aware of that may be cheaper or more effective. Workforce is going to be a really critical pillar of this moving forward. We know that that's something that's really central to all IT organizations right now, is making sure that we have the workforce we need with the right skills to be able to move forward with these more modern technologies, especially when it comes to some of the more sophisticated cloud offerings that are out there. So we want to make sure that we have a plan to support you, and you have the people skills and the human capital that you need, so that as you migrate or as you integrate cloud offerings into your infrastructure, you're able to sustain that over time. And the last thing we're going to be looking at is procurement. Do we have the right terms and conditions? Does everything comply with state strategy, procurement rules, standards, guidance? Are we procuring in a way that's going to give us flexibility to make changes and evolve over time? Or are we locking ourselves in? And the last thing I want to say on this is we're not going to be looking very prescriptively at these 4 things. We really want to work with you to make sure that these are planned out. Right now, we're not doing the due diligence with you when a request comes in to make a change or add a new cloud service. And we want to make sure that we're collaborating with you, using our expertise, using our visibility into what other departments are doing, so that we can verify that we have strong plans around each of these 4 pillars before you move forward with a particular integration or implementation. So now that we've kind of set the stage, I'd like to hand it over to Jared Johnson to talk a little bit more about what California Cloud Smart means in terms of how we're managing cloud services.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jared Johnson. I am the Deputy State CIO and the Chief Deputy Director of CDT. It's great to see so many colleagues on today. Hopefully you find the information useful, and we will be available to you afterwards with questions and answers. And immediately after that, we'll provide the resources back out to you so you can share with your colleagues that weren't able to attend today. I just want to say that it's hard to believe it's been 10 years since the state embarked on its cloud journey with the release of CDT's first policy, the Cloud First policy. I'm glad you're here at this critical time as we embark on the next phase and partner with our customers to identify safe, secure, and cost-effective cloud solutions. As Jonathan explained, our role at CDT is to ensure that we have cost-effective implementations of technology and to mitigate risk to the state's IT investments. I'm excited to announce that CDT's Cloud Smart policy and the California Cloud Service Assessment Program went live as of October 31st. The announcement was accompanied by many updated policies, including SAM 4983.1, which is the cloud computing policy, and the new California Cloud Services Assessment process. The California Cloud Services Assessment will connect customers with CDT's knowledgeable architects to help determine the most appropriate cloud solutions and to ensure important architectural, security, procurement, and workforce issues are consistently addressed. But the work is not done. Coming soon is our Cloud Smart Strategic Roadmap and our Cloud Smart Playbook that will be a comprehensive collection of reference materials, plans, and guidance from the state and industry partners to help each of you achieve appropriate levels of cloud maturity as envisioned by CDT. Also, in the spring of 2024, we will launch phase 2 of the California Cloud Smart Service Program, where we will re-engage with existing cloud customers to evaluate your implementations and ensure alignment with the new policies. And finally, coming toward the end of 2024, we will include adding software as a service or SaaS implementations to the assessment process. CDT is committed to being your partner on your cloud journey. Your success is our success, and we are here to support you every step of the way. I encourage you to reach out to us at any time following today's event if you still have questions. Thank you again for your time and commitment to build a government for California. Next, I'd like to introduce Janelle Dickey, CDT's statewide policy officer.
Thank you, Jared. Thank you for the introduction. Hello, everyone. It's good to see you. I wanted to share, Jonathan and Jared both shared the 10 years it's been since some of the cloud policies have been updated. So I wanted to share with you highlights of the policies that have been changed as part of the October 31st release. We have a number of definitions. I'll go over those in the next slide. But changes were also made to enterprise architecture, IT technology considerations, and then 4983 is the cloud computing introduction, and 4983.1 is the policy. Also changed was technology standards and asset management and the technology recovery plan. We want to make sure that we're building the framework around the new cloud services and making sure that all of our systems across the state are secure and can be recoverable should there be an incident. And so being able to have policies around that framework is helpful. SIM 141 is the cloud security guide that was updated, and then a new SIM 141 was implemented and is now published as the assessment guide. And this is part of the review process that will be done with the requests for cloud services. And then 18B is the exemption process if that is needed. Next slide. So the original 4 definitions that were published was cloud computing, infrastructure platform, and software as a service. The new ones that have been published is, you can see them there: public cloud, private cloud, hybrid cloud, cloud native, microservice architecture, zero trust architecture, and multi-cloud. If you do contracting or you do documents that you integrate into your operational processes, these are terminologies that you can use to do that in your day-to-day operations in your departments and agencies. And that concludes my presentation. I'm going to hand it back now to Victor Krause.
Victor, you're on mute.
Yeah.
I had to do it for the team. Somebody's got to do it. All righty. No, thank you, Janelle. And so this brings back to, you know, how does this affect me? How does this affect what we're doing? So with the Cloud Smart policy, 2 things immediately is infrastructure as a service and platform as a service must go through the Cloud Smart assessment process to make sure that we're doing exactly what Jonathan had on those pillars. Are what you're doing, is it secure? Can you get to your data? Why are you doing it? Have we chosen the right platform? This is all part of that assessment process. of platform as a service as infrastructure as a service. Going forward, that will help us achieve that review and make sure that it's intentional where you're going, and that you're going to achieve what it is you're trying to achieve by using that, and you have the full breadth of CDT behind you with all of the different options, features, and functionalities that those vendors bring to market. Can we have the next slide, please? What that looks like in a path for your department is you start with the discovery. Hey, I don't want to do CapEx. I don't want to do a refresh, or I have a new platform or service that I need to start producing. And that goes through your discovery phase. There's multiple clouds. We still offer a private cloud. So if your data is such as CGIS or highly critical data, you don't have to go. It's not one of those, well, I don't want to do CapEx, so I have to go to the cloud. It's like, we offer a secure on-site private cloud. So there's an option there. So it's really, when you're looking at your cloud journey, what's your type of data, where you want to go? That goes into the planning phases of it. What are you trying to do? What are you trying to achieve? Review the cloud assessment workshop, because that will bring those points to market. What's your data for classification? What's your disaster recovery? All of those things that will help you be successful are included in that California Services Assessment. So hopefully that's not a scary, oh, I got this huge hurdle I got to climb over. That's a cookbook of how do I be successful if I go to the cloud. That will identify the technical documents that you're going to need, which you should already have within your planning of what are you trying to do with this new application. That preparedness will be sent over to CDT. We have a simple, we'll use the same process you use today to request a cloud account, same requests as you follow today. Behind the scenes, that's where we pick up that California Cloud Assessment, and then we do, hopefully within 14 days is our SLA, to do a review, work with you, identify what's going on. If we see anything that we would want to reach back and say, you know, what are you doing about this? Or have you considered that? That's where that review, conversation, full understanding what's going on. And if it's, at the end of the day, it makes good sense to go to the cloud, public cloud or government cloud, we give you an account as you receive today, and we help you migrate into that public government forum cloud. If there's any time in there that we're saying this is not a good fit, this is maybe not a good decision, or we don't see either, you know, parts of the plan that are missing, we'll work with you on those through the process to find out how are you doing this piece, or have you addressed that? Because we want to make sure, as Jonathan alluded to, we don't want you making the move to the cloud that I'm going to save on CapEx, or I'm going to save because there's these wonderful features in the cloud, only to discover, holy mackerel, I can't afford it ongoing, or how do I get out of here? This isn't what I wanted, and now I'm locked into a technology or a vendor. So this is your path to success that will bring you to either that decision point of where you're going to go to cloud, and eventually, if public cloud is the right choice, your account will be provisioned the way it does today. So next slide, please. Within the cloud assessment, for off-prem cloud, it will be used for any new accounts. So if you're not already out there, new accounts, definitely. Any service changes you're doing to any of the cloud services, any changes to your account, or moving any new systems into the cloud. As what we're not doing day one today is we're not going back to anybody that's currently operating in the cloud and saying, stop everything you're doing, come back home, we want to review this. We'll be doing that over time, because obviously you will be doing as-moves and changes throughout time. And then, and as Jonathan alluded to, at the end of the month, 2024, we're going to be adding software as a service, because that is the next wild, wild west, that the software as a service environment is exploding exponentially, and you're gonna fall into the same risks there. What's the cost of doing business? How do I get my data back? Is it secure? What's my disaster recovery plan? All of those things. So we're going to start addressing those later on in 2024. But for today, we're looking at how are you using cloud? What are you putting in cloud? And we're going to be following that cloud services assessment for anything else that we're putting up in the cloud or changing the way we're doing cloud today. Some great references are in SIM 141, and it has the guidebook on how to go through the cloud assessment, how to submit your documents through SAFE, because your documents will have critical data in there that we won't want just tied to a ticket. So we're using SAFE for the file transfer, so that way only the folks that need to view that architecture, design, and data have access to the documents, and it's not just an attachment to a service ticket. And any major concerns and cares will be discussed through the review process with you prior to giving you a cloud account. Next slide, please. And then with that, I'd like to release over to David Lane with
Really
our...
quickly before we go to David, Victor. So
Yes.
Sydney, can we go back to the last slide? So just to make it really clear, so everything we're talking about is part of our off-premises cloud services. What about the on-premises cloud services that we offer?
Excellent. Sorry, I kind of missed that completely, because that's the easy button. Our on-prem cloud services and private cloud services, because CDT does offer an elastic data center that takes you into cloud services to reduce CapEx. Our managed cloud services, anything that's in our catalog as a managed cloud services, has actually already been vetted through this design process and the assessment and review process. So with that, we've already taken into consideration total cost of ownership, what's your exit strategy, how do we secure and maintain your data, how do we give your data back to you if you need it, how do we make sure that we have the staff skills and abilities, and how do we control the cost? Those are already baked in. So if you use any of the California managed cloud services, those are already included, and the California cloud assessment is not necessary to purchase those services, like I said, because that assessment has already been achieved. And then with that, we also capitalize on that capital X reduction on anything that we expand into the cloud, such as disaster recovery or any of the cloud services that we could do on-prem, that we would also like to expand into the cloud or take advantage of the microservices in the cloud. That's already been built out, and all of those security controls and cost controls are already in place today, and that platform is already readily available. And again, it's still processed through that standard service request, so the entrance for services remains the same. However, yeah, that is kind of the easy button with the services that we already have stood up as managed cloud services. Thanks, Jonathan. And then with that, I'm going to release it over to David Lane of the State Security Office. David?
Thank you, Victor. Yeah, good afternoon. This is David Lane, Senior Advisor working out of the Office of Information Security. Happy to be here today. This is a great initiative, and from a security perspective, there are really two areas of focus that stand out. It comes around the architecture of the system and then the monitoring of the system. So, SOC as a service has many benefits. SOC as a service is a mandatory service for state entities that provides 24/7 eyes on glass monitoring and alerting at no charge. SOC as a service has a holistic view of logs from CGen, CDT managed services, and entity managed services and assets. SOC as a service leverages trusted threat intelligence from federal entities such as Department of Homeland Security, FBI, also leverage law enforcement through CHP, closely partner with the military, the California Military Department. We utilize commercial services, and all this really allows us to curate and validate indicators of compromise. We collect through these mechanisms tips and leads that we investigate, and we look in these areas to see if there are any concerns. There's dark web monitoring that occurs, threat landscape monitoring. So a lot of services and activities that happen out of the SOC that at a no cost that add value to the security posture. SOC as a service also supports incident response engagements in partnership with our sister entity, the California Cybersecurity Integration Center, also known as the CalSIC. SOC as a service utilizes, I just read that. So with the CalSIC, should you ever experience a security incident, having the SOC as a service plugged in and having those logs available, and not only to the SOC, but our partners as well, allows us to respond quickly, reduce the dwell time to how long it takes to respond. And it's very important. SIM 5335A guides the onboarding process to ensure compliance with SAM as far as monitoring and alerting. So that link will be available at the end of the slide deck as well. For system security plans, what we've done, we realized that system security plans are very time intensive, a lot of detail. So we actually went through that. We made a lightweight version of the system security plan, and that covers the most vital things that we need to respond if there's an incident, and assure that there's good architecture, and also be able to look through this information and determine if there's any threats out there. So, for example, if you're running a certain vendor provided solution, and we get wind that there's a problem in that community, right? That vendor has a 0-day, and we need to know what state assets are exposed to that. Well, these system security plans allow us to do that, amongst a lot of other things. So lastly, I'll just say this: with the system security plan, if filled out correctly, we're going to understand the important contacts, who to call should we see something that's bad, the details about the components of the system, basically the system profile, the system and data classifications. If you're hit, we want to know how sensitive that data is and how widespreading it is. So that helps us really craft our response. The system architecture diagram, what does it look like? How's it connected? And then what are the data inputs, outputs, and system interconnections? So again, if this thing becomes compromised in the future, what other systems is it connected to, so we can stop the bleeding? We can go out and we can do our due diligence and make sure that there's no lateral movement. So for security and Cloud Smart, just to recap, we want to see those system security plans up front, and we want to see enrollment in SOC as a service. And that concludes our presentation. We are going to open it up for questions and answers, and I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Lisa.
Thank you, David.
Final step. You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Lisa Balanza, Project Director for the Cloud Smart Project. And my colleague, Harnett King, and I will be reading the questions that are in the Q&A aloud for our panelists to address for you guys today. So the first question we have is, will a recording of the Q&A be available? We did touch on that in the beginning, but for anyone who missed it, this will be recorded and the link will be made available once we have the transcript ready. So that the link will be sent out to the attendees and will also be published online, and that link will be made available. The second question is, the CCSA seems to initially only apply to infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. Many projects are incorrectly self-categorized as SaaS. How is SaaS being defined?
So this is Victor. SaaS is, just like the name says, software as a service. Infrastructure as a service is when you would be buying your cloud services. So within your service assessment, you're buying a platform to host something within cloud. So therefore, you're going to be buying either Windows, Linux, Unix, or you're buying CPU, memory, hard drive. You're basically, it's a replacement of physical CapEx expenditure or network equipment expenditure. So those were the building blocks of what it takes to stand up software or software services. Platform as a service is when you would be buying a platform somebody. That means it's already up and running. Like I'm going to give you a Windows login, a Linux or a Unix login, which would have that physical hardware or virtual hardware below it. That's platform as a service. Software as a service is something similar to I'll pick Salesforce. I'm going to have my customers log into an application and utilize the application. Software as a service is your email, a 365 email. That's software as a service. It's being hosted by others. You simply log in, utilize the service, and log back out, so that you're not responsible for looking at an operating system or physical hardware. You're actually more concerned about user profile, user permissions. So those are the three differences. Software as a service currently is purchased through a DGS contracting mechanism. And in platform as a service and infrastructure as a service are purchased through CDT, through the cloud hosting services. So that's really the difference there. And we want to make sure you're absolutely right that a lot of times there's some gray area, but really when you look at it, are you purchasing your capital expenditure hardware from somebody else, or are you purchasing an operating system from somebody else? Those are platforms as a service. If you're using a login, it still has a lot of the same risks, which is why we're going to look at that at the middle of next year, because it has a lot of the same risks, but that's really the main differences in the definitions. And a lot of times through the cloud assessment, we may see that cross-pollination, and we'll probably have conversations with the requester.
Thank you, Victor. The same attendee has raised their hand, so they may have an additional question. Do we want to allow live questions?
Sure.
Hey, everyone. Let's see here. I was hoping to get some clarification there for the definition of, the distinction between IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. So what if we have a custom application developed on the state's behalf, hosted in the cloud by a vendor, but they're only providing us access to the application and the vendor is administering the infrastructure? I know that's part of the gray area, but I was hoping for a clarification in at least that case.
That's absolutely a real use case, and where that really ties into, and I've had that conversation with many other customers, that the devil lies in the details, and is what is your contract vehicle, because within your contract vehicle will allow or disallow different items as far as your remedies if you end up going into remedies. And then the other one is devil's in the detail on the contract you've signed, because what you've just described is essentially software as a service. However, if you did not use the software as a service contract for that vendor, you're going to potentially put the state and your department at risk, because you may be lacking a lot of the T's and C's and intellectual property ownership. And at the end of the day, who owns the data that is hosted on their systems? So that's an area of very big concern, because if you use a platform as a service functionality, then you lose the T's and C's on uptime and supportability. So you really are blurring the environment on which contract vehicle you use. And then we definitely have some recommendations, and would be able to work with you offline on that and give you some both legal advice and technical advice on possibly the best way to approach that. Because it all depends on, at the end of the day, what's your use case and where do you want the data and who do you want to own the data when you're done.
Okay, that clarifies it. Thank you.
Thanks, Victor. The next question is there a release notes type of document highlighting what has changed in each policy and describing the impact or actionable measures that entities should be planning for? Or is it up to every entity to figure out the changes for themselves?
All right, we're not going to let you figure it out for yourself. So what the policies that have been changed have been around security, architecture, workforce, and procurement. But CIM 141 is the new cloud services assessment guide this highlights the documents and the things that are needed in the organization to provide. So SIM 141 has the framework that you need for the assessment guide. And then for the definitions, we've adopted the NIST definitions, and they are the standards that we use for our state. And so those are the ones that have been adopted for change. So there hasn't been, it's just modifying it to meet the federal Cloud Smart guidelines. And that's really where the changes are. But SIM 141 is your best guide to look at where the changes are and what's needed.
Thank you, Janelle. The next question is, are there documented guidelines on what qualifies for an exemption?
I'll take this. Exemptions, that's a good question. So there's two parts to it. There is an exemption as you go through the California Cloud Services Assessment, and that exemption is if any of the CDT approved cloud offerings do not meet your technical requirements. And when I say CDT approved, those are either services that CDT provides or the contracts that we provide. So that is where the exemption comes in. In terms of the actual assessment process, there is no exemption from the process, but we are considering a delegated authority type of approach, where as a department demonstrates that they are successfully meeting the policies and the requirements to migrate workloads into the cloud, we may no longer need to have the documents submitted to us, and we may give you that delegation, so to speak.
Thank you, Jared. Another question from Dwayne. Does the CCSA apply to cloud accounts themselves or to each solution already hosted in CDT cloud accounts? If it applies to existing solutions hosted in the cloud, what sort of modifications would trigger a new CCSA submission?
This Victor, I can help with that one. What's going to trigger is, are you doing any kind of major data architectural change? Are you changing the data classifications of the data that are up there? You're expanding it to where it's going to have a significant impact on other ancillary systems or feeder systems or downstream systems. And then the other biggie, which is it public facing? So are you doing it and how is that going to be affecting our constituents in California and data protections? All of the things that are in the cloud assessment today would be something that I would recommend you to review before you make any of those changes. And that way you'd be better served to understand if your answer is, well, we're making this change and it just went through the cloud assessment, there's really no change to any of these documents, or the architecture, my workforce is the same, then your answer is easy. If your answer is, oh, I'm going from a SQL database to an Oracle database, and I'm going to move it from this cloud vendor to that cloud vendor, but the platform was, the web page was still in the cloud, that would probably be something we would want to look at, because you're changing so many of the fundamental practices within your cloud architecture that would want to be reviewed. It looks like, Dwayne, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just to clarify, so the CCSA does apply to individual solutions, not necessarily just cloud accounts themselves.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
And it would lead into what Jared was talking about. If we're working with an agency, and then most of their compute is in the cloud, they've been in the cloud, they've been a good steward, they're meeting the CCSA on a regular basis, and they're rolling something new out, that may be something that we would look at that agency and just give them a delegation for a period of time, and then just do an assessment, like we do with Cal Military or somebody, to make sure that they're maintaining that over time. But it's pointless to go back again and again and again and again when you've already proved they are safe and secure. They're doing everything correctly in the cloud, and they've covered all their T's and C's, and they have a disaster recovery plan. Then by all means, carry on. What we're really looking at is trying to help folks that are going to cloud, or some of the things that we've seen our cloud vendors talk our customers into, and we want to help with some of that as well.
Thank you. Next question is, what is CDT's plan to handle bottlenecks if we are backlogged in requests in order to not delay projects and initiatives?
Yeah, with the cloud assessment, from the time and entry in the trouble ticketing system through the assessment, we have an SLA of no more than 14 days. And we have adequate resources to make sure that we meet that SLA. We definitely do not want this to be a bottleneck. We do not want it to slow your progress. And by all means, that's my commitment to you, that I will pile on any resource I need to make sure that we are meeting those and not becoming a roadblock or a blockage to your ability to perform.
Thank you, Victor.
And I'll clarify two things quickly. First, those are business days, so basically 2 weeks. And then the other is, if there is a rush, and hopefully, you're not coming to us with an assessment that needs to be completed in 1 day, but if there's some urgency or some importance to the review, please let us know. We want to work with you, and we'll make sure that we prioritize those and resource that request accordingly.
Thank you, Jonathan. The next question is, can you elaborate on the drivers for these changes? What problems have been identified that needed changing?
I'll either default to Jonathan and Jared, or I will take a stab at a couple I know of and protect the innocent.
I'll jump in. I think there's 3 primary drivers from our perspective. And as you all know, CDT is really statutorily tasked with protecting the state's technology investment and mitigating risks. So some of the things that have emerged, as you recall back to the slide that Jonathan shared, where we have progressed through cloud first into what we call cloud chaos or cloud sprawl, into the cloud smart. And one of the primary driving factors, I should say, is cloud sprawl has really kind of limited our visibility into the environments where the state's critical data and services are running. And so as each department has selected a solution and moved workloads, and data is being propagated out wherever the vendor's data centers are, there's a risk that we are opening up doors and kind of depending on the weakest link, so to speak, in terms of protecting those important assets. So as we go through the assessment process and gather the data from you, either as you're migrating, or like I mentioned, in a future step, we will be taking a look back at some of those that have already been migrated. It will help us understand what the technology portfolio looks like in the cloud, ensure that certain standards and protocols and security measures are being taken, and allow us to shore up some of those potential blind spots in our cybersecurity posturing. Also, workforce is a big one for us. We have heard and seen examples where workloads have been migrated into a cloud environment, and departments are not prepared to support that, and so they've had to enter into long-term consulting services situations and have a vendor operate on their behalf. And we feel this is inconsistent with Government Code 19130. So as part of this, we also want to make sure departments are taking those extra steps to ensure that they're reskilling their workforce and preparing them for success. And then finally, the emphasis with Cloud First has really been on migration of workloads. And we're really resetting that expectation and establishing what we call an integration strategy. With integration of cloud into your architecture, there are certain workloads that really don't lend themselves well, and they can lead to ballooning costs, like we've talked about with unexpected storage growth or with utilization that spikes in the cloud. That can really drive some of those long-term costs that aren't anticipated early on. So with our strategy and the Cloud Smart assessment process, it's really about taking a thoughtful look at what your plans are and what some of those hidden gotchas might be so that we can protect the state and protect the departments and ensure that you have a good, clean exit strategy and your staff are prepared to support those workloads in the cloud. So I don't know if there's anything, Jonathan, you may want to add, or if that was sufficient for the response.
No, I think that gives people a good idea of what we've been seeing and how we're trying to better partner with all of you to hopefully prevent some of those negative outcomes and encourage the positive ones that we've seen.
Yeah, and this one last one, and I want to hit it because it still resonates with me. I was at one of the Sheridan conferences, and one of the speakers, and it kind of took me, and that's why it still resonates, is one of the speakers was saying that, oh, we were all brick and mortar in our data center and we were running along, and then I got a call from Department of Homeland Security that bad actors were in my environment and in my data center. And we had all hands on deck. We helicoptered in people. We got it resolved. We picked up the everything and we moved it up to the cloud. And so now I'm no longer at risk because I'm no longer in my data center where the bad actors were operating, and I have all of my critical services now protected in my cloud service offering. And I'm thinking, you just moved from one data center to another. What did you do to mitigate the actual security risk? What was the vector? If you had cyber locking of your data, what you just by going to a cloud does not solve all of the operational costs. It just it moves the target, but it doesn't protect you. And that's a real key takeaway that I see a lot of people mistaking, that I've moved my data to the cloud, so I'm good. And no, you transferred where the data sits, you still own it, and it's still at risk unless you take the proper measures.
Thank you, everybody. Next question is, does moving new systems to the cloud include moving existing systems from on-prem to the cloud?
I'll venture into
Yes.
that one and say yes.
Yeah, that's yeah, yes.
Okay. Is an architecture review needed for migrating existing systems into the cloud or modernizing existing systems for the cloud?
Yes. Absolutely. There's some key advantages if you're modernizing or moving a current system. Your environment's obviously going to change, and there's some definite benefits and features and functionalities that we can help you select, and also find the proper home if you're going to the cloud. And it makes a good choice to go to cloud of which one to choose and how to utilize those new features and functionality.
And also, Victor, if I may, I think the first part of that question was kind of what we lovingly define as a lift and shift scenario. So if it's an existing workload, the architecture is not changing and you're just moving it to a cloud environment. There's a lot of pitfalls in doing that. And that's an area where we want to spend a little bit of time consulting with you and understanding, the business drivers in doing such a thing. So a lift and shift scenario doesn't necessarily take advantage of a cloud environment and the many things it offers. So you really have to think about, is it the first step on a longer journey to modernize, or is it simply just so you can check the box and say you've adopted cloud? So that's a really good opportunity for us to engage in that conversation and understand what the future plans are in that type of scenario.
Okay, thank you, Jared. This is Harnik Kang. I'm with the Office of Enterprise Architecture. Thank you, Lisa, for taking those points there. So I'm going to go ahead and do the next round of questions. So the next question is, when you say changes to cloud services are covered, how big of a change are we talking? Are we saying spinning up a new EC2 instance requires this, or does it have to be a delegated project level change?
Yes, Victor. So really what we're looking for is a fundamental change in the way you're doing business in the cloud. If you're simply expanding capacity to a system that's already there, that's the joy of being in the cloud. So no, it's when you're going to be architecturally or significantly changing the architectural design or the purpose of what it is you're doing in the cloud. But yeah, simply adding capacity up there to something that's pre-existing. That's like I say, that's the joy of being in the cloud, is it gives you that flexibility.
Okay, thank you, Victor. The next question, with CDT's approval, my agency has already migrated all its applications and resources to the cloud. Do we need to resubmit our cloud strategy plan to CDT for approval again? Also, how does this policy process impact the DGS SLP contracts?
So at this point in time, we are not going and having folks that are already currently operating in the cloud resubmit. However, in spring, summer of 2024, we'll probably be looking at existing cloud instances and then reaching out to those agencies. But as existing cloud users, no, only if you're going to be changing or modifying or adding new workloads up there.
Okay, thank you, Victor. Next question. How does,
I'm sorry, if I
please.
may, the second part of that question, consistent with things today, Chris, cloud contracts through CDT or using a CDT service would come to us. Anything that's on SLP, such as a SaaS offering like Salesforce, ServiceNow, et cetera, those would still be obtained using the DGS procurement platforms.
Okay, thank you very much, Jared. All right, so next question. How does CAMC help us determine with TC total cost of ownership? I'm not familiar with the pricing approach.
Within California Managed Cloud, we have pricing structure for that, and I believe it's on a pass-through method. So with your total cost of ownership, that would actually be one key element of the entire equation. So you would need to look at your equation. What is your workforce? What kind of contractors? There's so many other costs that bake into that, but we will absolutely provide you the cost of CAMC. And then that would lean against any other cost you have of that. So you can drive it to total cost of ownership for your instance. And obviously different compute cases have different costs, whether you're using, say, Oracle databases where somebody else may only be using a web service. So your costs would vary greatly on things other than the fixed cost of CAMC, but we can definitely help you with what the cost for CAMC would be, and then it can be incorporated with the other costs that are associated to the total cost of ownership.
Okay, thank you, Victor. So we have time for 5 more minutes for questions, and then we'll need to do a wrap up. So let's continue with this process here. So the next question is, for services that are covered, what level of documentation is required? Is the security TRP documentation required for all current operational systems or just for the new project that is being proposed?
I can start this one off. So yeah, with the system security plan, that's in addition to everything that you're already required to complete via SAM. You're already required to complete an complete system security plan for each system that's in operation. When you initiate a cloud request, what we're asking is that you present us with that system security plan, but minus all the controls. So just the information we would need to conduct an assessment. So that way we're not sharing as much data over the wire, and you're only sharing the stuff that we need to see in order to conduct the assessment. You're still required, though, to comply with SAM and complete all of the paperwork, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you very much, David. So next question.
Sorry, Harnik, can I jump
sorry, please.
David, there are a bunch of questions about, because David, you said the magic word free/no cost. can you talk a little bit more about SOC as a service and what that actually means for our clients? We probably got a little excited.
Yeah, it's good question, and that has come up many times. So, SOC as a service is a free service to state entities. However, there's opportunities to incur costs. So, but what I mean by that is we have at CDT, we have 6 shifts of folks that operate 24/7, and they're continuously monitoring and these alerts. If they see anomalies, they're going to research them. They're going to create Cal Caesars tickets. They're going to make sure that all the people that need to know are aware of what's going on. If you have additional requirements, let's say you need to retain your logs for 7 years in order to comply with the IRS. That 7 years worth of retention is still on you. It's still on the customer. What you're not going to pay for, though, is the monitoring, the personnel behind the monitoring and alerting. So we will, free of charge, monitor your logs and your alerts. But if you have additional needs, yeah, you will incur costs. So that's the simple answer.
Okay, thank you so much, David. Thank you, Jonathan. So we'll ask one final question here before we turn it over to Jonathan. So who should be contacted to initiate the CCSA exemptions? I don't see any specific contact information in the CCSA manual.
So on the California Cloud Assessment, within that process, there is an exception process. And I can't recall, I believe we have the link at the end of this presentation as well. And we will share that link with the recipients of this call. But yeah, there is a link to the exemption process. And I believe it's also in SIM 141 as well as the link to the exemption process.
And I'll just jump in and recommend, we'll have it on this last slide as and we can go ahead and pull the slides back up, Sydney. We have a mailbox for you to ask further questions. Keep sending questions there, but also your best bet is always to reach out to your CDT account lead. If you have any questions about particular services, exemptions, ways to interact with our service now and everything there. So we'll make sure to have some more information on that as well. And we're also going to take all the questions that we couldn't answer, as well as some of the ones that we have answered, and add it to an FAQ document that we have, hopefully for the first item that we have on the list. So before I get into this slide really quickly, I just want to thank everyone again for their time today, both on the CDT side and especially all of our state partners for coming in, asking really great questions and making sure we're all on the same page as we start to launch this. It's super helpful for us to get that kind of feedback and see the kind of things that are important to you that may not be clear, so we can make sure that we're rolling it out in a coordinated fashion and that you feel confident in the way that we've made some of our changes to this policy and the way that we're trying to make changes to the way that we build the assessment to make it easier for you. That includes automated workflows under ServiceNow, and there's some other things that we've been testing out internally that hopefully we can get out there and get some more efficiencies in the way that we process these requests. As Victor mentioned, we're going to send a survey out later. That survey will be used both to assess the basically how well this session went. Were there things that we didn't cover that you want us to cover? Do you want more of these kinds of things, as well as for you to ask more questions and give us more feedback on areas that you might need some additional discussion or more resources. And of course, always feel free to reach out to us. We've been meeting with statewide and department level tech teams, procurement teams, security teams. So if you are interested in learning more, having us come to you and having a more in-depth discussion for your department, we're more than happy to do so. But we just wanted to leave you, and remember, we'll send you the recording in this deck so you can click through all of these. Some resources that are available to you all. We completely redid our cloud site. So the first bullet point is our new California Cloud Smart site that has a lot of the information and resources that we talked about today. That will also include some of the questions that we've been getting both as part of this discussion and some feedback that we've done in the past. You can also take a look at that second bullet to check out the assessment itself. So you can see the processes around there. The next couple of bullets just detail the actual policy. So the tech letter that announced the changes, the SIM, which lays out the CCSA. And then there were some questions I saw in the Q&A about cloud system security plans. That last bullet is where you want to go to get more resources on that. So we'll continue to get your feedback from the question and answer, from the survey we send out, but always feel free to reach out to the California Cloud Services mailbox. We're there and we have people managing that mailbox to make sure we get questions to you. So, don't hesitate to reach out if you have a specific question about something. And as we're hopefully trying to reiterate, this is really supposed to be a collaborative process. So we want to work with you and make sure we're getting you what you need. We're not intending this to be a rigid process or a punitive one. We're hoping that it's something that at the very least is painless and at best helps bring up some discussions between us so that we can make sure we're building the optimal infrastructure for your department as well as the state overall. So we're at time. I want to thank everybody again for giving us your time today. And we look forward to continuing that discussion with you in each of your departments. So thank you again to our presenters and thanks again for everyone joining us. And we'll continue this conversation soon.